is that this all goes down to the offensive line, and we're used to offensive line problems when it comes to the Texans. It seems like it's been a thing going back to the start of the franchise, going into the Deshaun era, going into now. Like the offensive line, no matter how much you invest, there's a serious problem. Can the Texans take the next step with this offensive line? I think that's the question. DeMeco Ryans gaslighted us all week. He said he wanted to talk about the positives. They didn't really make any changes until they were forced to with Kendrick Green. They benched him briefly last week, and they brought him back. Titus Howard insists that they were the better team. Like with this offensive line, can the Texans take the next step? And I think it's going to take a couple of things. First of all, something's got to change. Whether it's one guy bench, whether it's two guys bench, whether it's a trade, like something's got to change. You can't just throw the same five guys out there. At this point, that's malpractice. The other thing is you have to know what you're dealing with. Bobby Slowik is not calling offense like he's aware that the offensive line is bad. And it's one thing for the coaches to say something, but when you see them actually do it and you see them actually functioning the way they are and acting like nothing's wrong, that's where it gets discouraging, and that's where you start to get that unfortunate, helpless feeling with the O-line. So it's going to be on Bobby Slowik. It's going to be on the Texans to make a change. Does that guarantee you that the offensive line improves? I don't know, but it's bleeding into CJ Stroud's spirit. Like CJ Stroud, we saw him throw the helmet in Green Bay, and it's just very clear he's not as accurate as he was. He doesn't have the time. Yesterday, they asked him about the wide receivers. CJ Stroud thought it was interesting. He said, you could have anyone out there. We're not going to get the job done. That's basically saying that it's impossible with this offensive line. So I'm asking you the question, do you think the Texans can take the next step with this offensive line?
No. They cannot take the next step with this offensive line. Can they get back to some of those tiny bits of success that they had this past or earlier in the season when there was some positivity to the passing game? Yes, but they cannot take the next step with this offensive line. They cannot push this passing offense into the upper echelon where they thought it was supposed to be or they thought it could go. They cannot do that with this offensive line. They can make a change or some changes and adjustments and improve. But the five guys, the 6 guys with Kendrick Green, 7, 8 guys they're not good. They're not good enough. So they can't go to another level. Can they get back to where they were, where it looked okay, but you're still wondering, like, is there a little bit more to this passing offense? Yeah, they can get there. But the next step, no.
And I think the two most important guys who've done a hell of a job, and they've gotten us out of football hell quicker than we could have anticipated. They're kind of showing signs of being a little bit blinded by the offensive line, not just with their words, but with their actions. And I think actions matter as much as anything. You had DeMeco Ryans kind of gaslighting us last week and saying, let's focus on the positives. I can say this with 100% certainty because there's not a coach that I would trade DeMeco Ryans for. On his defense, the equivalent of what's happening with this offensive line, it doesn't happen on his defense. There's some sort of change made. 100%. He is an elite defensive coach. He's an elite football coach in general, and he's still a really young football coach. But I feel very confident that this does not happen on his defense. Then I heard this secondhand. I don't really listen to Nick Caserio's interview, the weekly one. But I guess Nick Caserio is talking about like defending the offensive line. And I said this a minute ago, but I'm just going to make this clear. Nick Caserio is the most healthy routine guy that there is. Like it's Tom Brady, like how healthy Nick Caserio is. I don't think he eats an ounce of junk food over the course of the entire season. I would rather ask Nick Caserio about what kind of Halloween candy I should eat than I would about the offensive line. He's the last person I want to hear talk about the offensive line, because you talk about any way of misevaluating an offensive line. Nick Caserio he has performed that task, from extensions to first round picks to second round picks to bringing guys in and giving them extensions. Like if you have a problem with these 5 offensive linemen, look no further than Nick Caserio. And it's not just one way of evaluating. He's been awful on the offensive line. So Nick Caserio gaslighting about the offensive line, sir, I will ask you where to go get a good slice of pizza in Boston or Houston before I want to hear anything he has to say about the offensive line.
Yeah, he has either kept or acquired all those guys on the offensive line.
And you go back to New England, Tom Brady was basically directing the offensive linemen, and they have one of the best offensive line coaches of all time. So Nick Caserio, I don't need to hear him about the offensive line. I also want to do this, and I find this interesting when it comes to this offensive line. And I think Laramie Tunsil, you put him to the side. Laramie Tunsil gets a lot of bad venom from fans because of the penalties. If 5 guys on the offensive line perform the way Laramie Tunsil did, you would be in pretty good shape. So I'm gonna put Laramie Tunsil to the side. I do think it's kind of interesting though that his mindset is being like kind of passed. It feels like to Titus Howard, and I just want to do a side by side because I think it's really interesting. It's just an interesting observation. And again, it doesn't matter what players and coaches say, but it's interesting that the most pissed off and accountable that we've seen an offensive lineman this year was Kendrick Green last week when he didn't play. He didn't get to play, and he was pissed. He wasn't on the field during all these struggles. And yesterday after the game, let's just do a little side-by-side. Your high-paid tackle, Titus Howard, and then let's hear what Kendrick Green, who's played one game, less than one game for the Texans, had to say. Let's start with Titus Howard. This is Titus Howard. Try to make sense of the problem that the Texans have on the offensive line based on what Titus Howard says. I'll let you be the judge of this. Take it away, Titus.
Came down to it as a group up front. We just had one-on-ones. Just didn't do good enough.
And they weren't showing anything different. They ran the defense they normally run, all the stuff looks.
They didn't even run that many stunts. Just got one-on-one. That's the biggest thing.
When you have a game like this, collectively as a line, and everybody that pass protects, what do you guys do to try to prove this and be able to have better performances going forward?
Really just got to take what we get in that practice and apply it to the field. We're really not doing that right now. We started off early in the game. We were letting the quarterback get hit too much. Trickled down. Made a slow start for us. The run game was going, but the pass pro wasn't there. And that's been our problem. So we got to fix that.
Do you feel like it is fixable?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's fixable. It's just like DeMeco said, man, we got to go out there. We knew what we was going to get. We got to win the one-on-ones. That's where they had us, our group. We knew what we had to do. We knew what we was going to see. We just didn't win the one-on-ones across the board.
Something that once something starts kind of going bad, everything kind of folds in on itself, and it makes it tougher to kind of set level.
Yeah, man, you just got to move on, man. Like, if something bad happens, you just got to not let that trickle down and keep happening throughout the game. I know my mentality is if something bad happens, I'll try to push it away and don't let that affect the rest of my game. I always went by that. But as a group, we just got to be better, man. We haven't played to the standard that we need to play to in the past game. Of course, we've been running the ball, but, you got to be able to throw the ball to win. And like I said, quarterback's getting hit too much, so we got to be better.
What's the most frustrating part about it?
The most frustrating part is that, man, we the better team. We let that game get away from us, especially in the second half. We didn't come back out with the same intensity we had like in the second quarter. So we just let a team steal a win from us. Kudos to them. The boys fought hard in the second half, but we just didn't finish the game right.
All right, so you couldn't block them one-on-one, but you were the better team. Like that's kind of an important piece to the thing. But I want to hear what Kendrick Green sounds like, because he's not, Kendrick Green is kind of a guy he was a Pittsburgh didn't want him. It seems like he wants to play. Titus Howard said that we were the better team. Let's hear what Kendrick Green had to say about it.
You almost played this week to start the game, then you wound up going in. How did you feel like it went? How do you kind of handle all that when you're thrown into the game, kind of in the middle of it?
Didn't play well enough. Clearly, the score shows that too. Definitely some players I left out there. Just felt like I needed to kind of get the rust off, But you got to be ready when your number's called, and I tried to do the best I could, but it just wasn't good enough. So.
What do you think they did tonight to make things
Same things we've been struggling with all year so far, and it's fixable, but nobody gonna fix it for us. So we gotta we gotta get back in the lab and fix it.
As an offensive line, you guys are a prideful group. How tough is it when your quarterbacks, that's a record for sacks for him in his career, 8 and a lot of hits?
I mean, you know, you don't want to see that. You know, he's getting off the ground way too many times, so we're going to fix that. And we back to the drawing board this week. We got a big opponent next week.
All right. So there you go. So I go back to this, and the question obviously is, can the Texans take the next step with this offensive line? If the answer is no, how do they give themselves the best chance to do it, though? Like, there needs to be a change, and Bobby Slowik needs to change the way he calls plays. I think that's the answer. That's what they need to do. But even then, there's no guarantees. But it is crazy to hear the difference between Kendrick Green and Titus Howard after the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. It's not surprising that there's a different mood or mentality. And they were changing offensive lines like weekly last year, and they could figure it out. And they did figure it out. And they had guys in and out of the lineup. They had backups playing. They had guys playing positions that they had, you know, no reason to be playing. Like, I mean, Josh Jones played left guard at one point last year. Michael Dieter was your starting center at one point last year. Like, those things shouldn't work. And like, they found ways to make it work last year. And they have the starting offensive line for most of this, you know, for 8 games now, you know, 9 games, whatever it is, that they've wanted for 18 plus months. And it's worse than that mismatch patchwork offensive line that they had most of last year. And so how do you make it work with this offensive line? Maybe you make it a mismatch patchwork offensive line. You start moving guys in and out. Like, they haven't tried everything.
They haven't tried anything. I mean, they benched Kendrick Green briefly, and then they were going to – I mean, I don't even know that he comes out of the game yesterday. Like, I don't even know that he comes out of the game for Kendrick Green if it's not for the injury. So, I guess the good news is they haven't tried really anything. The bad news is, though, that they haven't really tried anything. So we'll see how it goes. But the offensive line, it's more of the same kind of with the offensive line.